The rain came down in thin, silvery threads, washing over the cracked pavement and the faded chalk outlines that had once marked a tragedy. It had been 22 years since that night, but Daniel Moore could still hear his sister's laughter echoing through the corridors of his mind. Faint, fragile, a sound that never seemed to age even as he did. Her name was Emily, and she was 17 when she was taken from him. The police had called it a robbery gone wrong. The case had gone cold within a year. But for Daniel, it had never stopped burning. He'd been 20 back then, young and reckless, too consumed by grief to understand the weight of silence. For years he waited, calling detectives, scouring newspapers, visiting the police station, so often that officers began to recognize his footsteps before his face. But the file gathered dust, just another forgotten folder in a mountain of unsolved crimes. Eventually, the detectives stopped returning his calls. The city moved on. Daniel didn't. 2 decades later, he worked as a night janitor at a downtown law firm, a quiet man with haunted eyes. He didn't drink, didn't socialize, and never spoke about the past. His coworkers whispered that he was broken, but Daniel had learned long ago that silence could be a weapon. And in that silence, he hunted. It started with an article. A retired cop had published a memoir, a self-congratulatory book about his years, bringing justice to the streets. Buried in one of the chapters was a paragraph about a string of unsolved murders from the late 90s. The description matched Emily's case almost perfectly. Same neighborhood, same method, same time frame. But what caught Daniel's eye was the mention of a suspect, an unnamed drifter who had vanished after questioning, presumed dead. Only one detective had ever believed he was still alive, Detective Raymond Cole. Daniel found him 3 months later. Raymond was living alone in a rundown house on the outskirts of the city, a bitter old man with whiskey-stained fingers and too many regrets. At first, he refused to talk. But the name Emily Moore cracked something in him. They spoke for hours that night. Cole confessed that he'd always suspected a man named Victor Hales, a small-time crook with connections to the underworld, who'd been arrested days after Emily's murder for another crime and then quietly released. Hales had disappeared not long after. "I could never prove it," Cole said, his voice trembling. "But he did it. I'm sure of it." For the first time in 2 decades, Daniel felt something like clarity. It was cold, sharp, and alive. He began to dig. Hales had changed his name, moved towns, and started over. He was living under a new identity, working as a mechanic in a small coastal city 200 miles away. The world had forgotten his crimes, but Daniel had not. He spent weeks watching him from afar. The way he smiled at customers, the way he joked with his coworkers, the way he lived a life he didn't deserve. Every laugh, every casual gesture, scraped against Daniel's mind like sandpaper on an open wound. One night, Daniel walked into the garage after closing hours. Hales looked up, wiping grease from his hands, and asked if he could help. Daniel's voice was calm, almost gentle when he spoke. "Do you remember Emily Moore?" The name hit him like a bullet. For a brief second, recognition flashed across Hales's face, a twitch, a flicker of memory. Then came the denial. But Daniel had waited too long, learned too much, to be fooled by words. He didn't come there for answers. He came for closure. No one heard the struggle. The rain outside drowned every sound. When the police found Hales's body 2 days later, it was ruled as a break-in gone wrong. Another unsolved case in a long line of forgotten tragedies. But Daniel knew. He always would. He didn't run. He returned home, packed away the old newspaper clippings, and placed Emily's photograph on his desk, one last time. He looked at her smile, the innocence frozen in that old picture, and whispered, "It's done." There was no joy, no triumph, only the hollow ache of a man who had traded everything for peace and found none. Weeks later, Detective Cole read the news about Victor Hales's death. He knew immediately who had done it, but he said nothing. Instead, he poured himself another drink and stared out the window, whispering to the dark, "Maybe some cases are better left closed." Daniel Moore vanished soon after. Some said he fled the city. others that he ended up in the river, swallowed by the same rain that had witnessed his sister's death so many years ago. But in the corners of forgotten police files, beneath the layers of time and indifference, one story remained, a whisper of the man who became his own kind of justice. They called him the Cold Case Avenger. But to Daniel, he had only ever been one thing: Emily's brother. The storm rolled in again that night, heavy and slow, just like the one from 22 years ago. Daniel sat in the dim light of his apartment, the hum of the old refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. On the table before him lay a single object, an evidence photograph, yellowed at the corners, showing the alley where Emily's body had been found. He traced the edges of the picture with his thumb, his breath shallow. Every drop of rain outside seemed to fall in time with his heartbeat. He had thought that vengeance would feel different, louder, maybe. He had imagined a sense of release, a flood of satisfaction after years of suffering. But instead, there was nothing. Just an emptiness that felt older than the city itself. The killing hadn't brought peace. It had only reopened the wound he had been trying to close for half his life. He began visiting the old places again, the cafe Emily used to go to after school, the small park by the river where she liked to read. Most of the landmarks were gone now, swallowed by new buildings and parking lots, but the memories still lingered, ghosts that refused to fade. Sometimes, he caught himself talking to her out loud, as if she were still beside him. "You can rest now," he would whisper. But the truth was, he didn't believe it. Not yet. One night, while walking home through the rain-slick streets, Daniel noticed a police cruiser parked near his apartment building. A man sat inside, engine idling, cigarette glowing between his fingers. The face behind the windshield was unmistakable: Detective Cole. The old man hadn't come to arrest him, Daniel could tell. He just sat there, watching, waiting, perhaps hoping for a sign that the act had brought Daniel peace. But Daniel didn't give him one. He simply turned away and disappeared into the stairwell. Cole never knocked on his door. Maybe he didn't have the heart. Maybe he understood that what Daniel had done wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about the cruel arithmetic of loss, the kind of loss that eats at you until you either break or become something else entirely. Cole, too, carried his own ghosts. He'd failed a lot of families in his career, but Emily Moore's face had haunted him the longest. And now, he had the uneasy feeling that justice, real, unflinching justice, had finally come, not through the law, but through blood. Months passed. The city grew warmer, then cold again. Daniel quit his job and disappeared without a word. Some said he moved up north, to a fishing town where no one knew his name. Others swore they saw him sleeping in bus stations, living out of a duffel bag, always carrying a single photograph in his coat pocket. But the truth was darker still. A year after Victor Hales's death, a park ranger found an abandoned car deep in the woods near the state line. Inside was a stack of old case files, neatly bound with red string. There was also a single note, written in Daniel's precise, deliberate handwriting. "The system forgot her. I didn't." They never found his body. For a while, people whispered about him, reporters, online forums, true crime enthusiasts. The Cold Case Avenger, they called him. A ghost who hunted forgotten killers. Some claimed he'd left clues for others to follow, a secret trail of justice for those who'd lost faith in the law. Others dismissed it as myth, a story the public wanted to believe because it made the world feel less cruel. But somewhere, in a dusty archive room beneath the police headquarters, there's a file that no one talks about. Inside are photos, witness reports, and a single name circled in red: Daniel Moore. The officers who've read it all say the same thing: he wasn't a hero, not really. He was something stranger, something lonelier. A man who became the thing he feared most. A man who crossed every line because justice had none left to offer. A man who could not live in a world where his sister's killer still breathed. And when the rain falls hard on the city, there are still those who swear they've seen him, just a silhouette at the edge of the street, standing beneath a flickering streetlight, head bowed, watching. Not a killer, not a savior, just a brother who couldn't stop searching for a peace he would never find. They say ghosts are born from tragedy, not death. If that's true, then Daniel Moore never died at all. He just became one.